Once, Queen Seraphina had ruled over shining star systems, her throne surrounded by loyal voices and endless fleets. Now she sat in silence inside a ruined palace hidden on a dying world. The Galactic Council, who once treated her as an honored ally, now pretended she did not exist. Her empire had fallen, her ships destroyed, and her name spoken only as a curse among rivals. Seraphina still carried herself with dignity. She wore silver armor lined with crimson cloth, though it was scarred and worn from battle. A crown of obsidian rested upon her brow, not as a mark of power, but as a reminder of what had been lost. Each day she asked herself the same question: why am I alive when my people are gone? The answer came in the form of a human soldier. Captain Elias Ward was not tall compared to her kind, but his presence carried weight. He wore battered combat armor painted with faded earth insignias. A plasma rifle hung across his back and a knife rested at his hip. Unlike the Council's envoys or her own guards who had fled months ago, Elias remained. He had been ordered to leave, to abandon the Queen like everyone else, but he had refused. On the first day of her exile, Seraphina had demanded to know why he stayed. His answer had been short: because you're under my protection. That doesn't change just because others ran. She did not understand it then. Loyalty without gain was strange to her. Aliens bargained, traded, or betrayed. But this human spoke as if his word was law, and no force in the galaxy could bend it. The dying palace echoed with silence, until one morning the silence broke. Elias stood by a cracked window, scanning the skies. His visor glowed faintly as he watched for signals. "They're searching again," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the tone of a soldier who expected danger but refused to fear it. Seraphina turned her gaze toward him. "Who?" "Your rivals, scouts, raiders, assassins, call them what you want. They're hunting you." He turned from the window, his expression unreadable beneath the glow of his helmet. "And they'll come here." The Queen felt a stab of fear, though she kept her face composed. "Then you should leave. I will not hold you in death's grip. Your people do not owe me anything." Elias shook his head. "That's not how humans work," she wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that his loyalty was foolish. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she saw no hesitation. Later that night, Seraphina sat by the fire he had built from broken palace furniture. Shadows danced across the ruined walls, and for the first time in weeks, warmth touched her skin. Elias sat opposite her, sharpening his knife with patient strokes. She studied him quietly. "You are different from the others. Even my generals abandoned me when the fleets fell." He didn't look up. Maybe they were afraid. "They were cowards," she spat, bitterness leaking through her controlled tone. "They swore loyalty to me, yet they ran like insects when the sky burned. Now I sit in ruins and the galaxy laughs at the name Seraphina." Elias stopped sharpening and finally looked at her. His eyes were sharp, steady like iron. "You're still alive. That means the story's not finished. The galaxy doesn't decide when you're done. You do." His words cut through her despair like a blade. She fell silent, unsure how to respond. No alien would ever speak to her that way. Most would flatter or mock or pity. But the human treated her not as a fallen queen, but as a person who could still choose her path. Before she could speak, an alarm flickered on Elias's wrist pad. He rose instantly, scanning the dark skies. Ships, 2 of them. Fast approach. Seraphina's heart tightened. "Assassins." "Most likely," Elias replied. He grabbed his rifle, checking its charge. "We move. Now." The Queen followed him through broken hallways, her long cloak dragging against cracked stone. They reached a hidden passage beneath the palace, where Elias had prepared escape routes days earlier. He had thought of everything: supplies, weapons, even maps of nearby star systems. She realized then that this soldier had been planning for the day her enemies came. Outside, the night air was cold. The sky above burned with streaks of fire as enemy dropships cut through the clouds. Seraphina's chest tightened at the sight. Elias crouched low, signaling for her to follow. "Keep behind me. Stay quiet." They moved through the ruins, slipping past collapsed towers and shattered statues. The dropships landed with a roar and alien hunters poured out, tall armored figures with glowing eyes and plasma blades. Their voices hissed in the night, calling for the Queen's blood. Seraphina froze as they drew near. She had fought battles before, but this was different. She had no army, no throne, no command. Just one human soldier standing between her and death. Elias raised his rifle and fired. Blue plasma lit the ruins as the first hunter fell. He moved with ruthless precision, each shot placed with deadly calm. But more enemies closed in, their weapons crackling. "Run!" Elias shouted. Serafina hesitated. Queens did not run. Yet she obeyed, sprinting through the ruins as Elias covered her with bursts of fire. Explosions shook the ground, dust clouding the air. Hunters screamed as they fell, but more arrived, chasing them through the night. At last they reached a hidden cave at the edge of the city. Elias sealed the entrance with charges, blocking the hunters behind them. The echoes of pursuit faded into silence. Breathing hard, Serafina leaned against the stone wall. Her crown was tilted, her cloak torn, but she was alive. She turned toward Elias, who was reloading his rifle with steady hands. "You risked your life," she said quietly. He looked at her, his expression calm. "That's what it means to protect someone. You don't run when it gets hard." She studied him for a long moment. In that dark cave, she realized something she had never believed before, that perhaps loyalty still existed in the galaxy. Not in crowns, not in councils, not in fleets, but in one human soldier who refused to leave her behind. And so the queen in exile was not alone. The cave was quiet, but the silence was uneasy. Serafina, the alien queen, pressed her back against the cold stone. Dust from the ruined city outside still clung to her cloak, and the faint scent of burning metal lingered in the air. She could feel the weight of every lost ally, every abandoned friend. Yet in that moment, one truth remained. Captain Elias Ward was still alive, and so was she. Elias crouched nearby, checking the cave's entrance. He scanned the sky with his visor, searching for enemy sensors or drones that might have followed them. "They won't stop," he said softly, almost to himself. "Hunters like these. They don't give up until the target is dead." Serafina frowned. "Then why are you still here? Your people, your command sent you away. You could be anywhere safe, yet you risk your life for me." Elias leaned back against a jagged rock. "Because I promised. And humans don't break promises." She did not understand it. Aliens bargained, made deals, or betrayed each other to survive. Loyalty meant little if it didn't serve ambition. And yet, this human soldier's words held a strange, stubborn truth. Before she could question him further, the ground trembled faintly. Serafina stiffened. "They found us again." Elias rose and moved toward the cave's narrow exit, rifle in hand. "Yes, and they won't come alone. I suspect they've called reinforcements." Outside, the first enemy scouts had already begun combing the ruins. Sleek ships with black hulls hovered low, their searchlights slicing through the night. Alien figures taller than Serafina and bulkier than most humans, moved with precision, their glowing weapons scanning every shadow. "They are fast," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice for the first time since the fall of her empire. "They are," Elias admitted, "but they are predictable. They hunt with arrogance, not patience. We will use that." Serafina followed him silently as he led her through a hidden passage, barely wide enough for both of them to move quickly. The walls were cracked, jagged, and coated with dust. Every step was a risk, but Elias moved like a shadow, confident and calm. After several minutes, they reached an abandoned transport ship buried under rubble. Elias brushed debris away, revealing the controls. "We can get off this planet fast, but we'll need to avoid their patrols. It will not be easy." Serafina studied the small ship, realizing it could not carry more than a few passengers. Yet she felt a strange relief. For the first time since her empire's fall, she had a chance to move, to survive. "Do you trust me?" Elias asked as he powered up the engines. The hum of the ship filled the cramped space. She hesitated. "Trust is not a word I use lightly." "You will have to," he said simply. "Out there, trust can be the difference between life and death." The engines roared to life. The transport lifted off the ground slowly, dodging the first searchlights. Outside, enemy ships began to move toward them, but Elias expertly maneuvered through debris, staying low to the surface to avoid detection. Serafina watched him. He was fearless, or perhaps reckless, but there was skill behind every move. She had commanded fleets, led armies, and survived countless battles. Yet she could not have done what Elias was doing with such precision. Hours passed as they navigated through ruined cities, dense asteroid fields, and the shadowed valleys of the planet. Every now and then enemy drones appeared, scanning the skies with bright lights. Elias would duck low, twist the ship, or fire warning blasts to divert them. Each encounter tested their nerves, but none ended in capture. During one pause in a hidden canyon, Serafina stepped out of the ship. The air was cold, thin, and harsh. She gazed at the horizon, the twin moons glowing faintly in the galaxy was vast, but nowhere felt safe. Queen Serafina and Captain Elias had left the ruined planet behind, but the shadow of pursuit followed them like a predator. Every system they entered carried risk. The humans' transport ship was small, fast, and easy to hide. Yet the hunter drones that scoured the stars were tireless. Inside the cockpit, Elias navigated through asteroid belts using the irregular terrain to shake enemy sensors. "We need a safe zone," he said, adjusting the ship's thrusters. "Somewhere no one will think to look for us." Serafina watched him closely. "A safe zone? Is such a thing possible in the galaxy? Everyone has abandoned me. My allies, my fleet, even my advisors, they've all gone. How do you trust we will find safety?" Elias did not look at her immediately. He kept his eyes on the star-filled void. "Trust isn't about guarantees. It's about taking action despite fear. If we wait for guarantees, we die in the dark." The Queen did not respond. She had spent centuries relying on strategy, power, and alliances. But Elias spoke differently, plain, honest, and firm. His words carried weight she had never felt before. Hours later, they landed on a quiet, abandoned mining station orbiting a dead planet. The station was cracked and lifeless, but it offered shelter. Elias guided the ship inside, carefully docking it in the derelict hangar. Outside, the silence of space seemed almost peaceful compared to the chaos of their pursuers. "This will do for now," Elias said, shutting the ship down. "We rest, resupply, and plan. Tomorrow we move again." Serafina sat in the ship, her hands folded over her lap. She was exhausted, her mind racing with memories of betrayal. Yet she could not help noticing Elias's unwavering focus. His calm strength was unlike anything she had encountered. "You trust me too easily," she said after a long silence. "Humans fight for what you believe, yes, but you have no reason to care for me. You risk your life for a stranger." Elias met her gaze. "I am not risking for a stranger. I am risking for someone who is alive and needs protection. That is reason enough." She studied him, trying to understand the simplicity of his logic. Loyalty, honor, courage, all these things the humans seem to value so naturally despite having nothing to gain. Her pride and skepticism battled with her growing admiration. The next morning, they explored the station for supplies. It was mostly empty, but they found food, water, and spare energy cells for the ship. Elias moved quickly, scanning every corridor. "Hunters may have missed this place," he said, "but they will search all likely hideouts. We need to be careful." Serafina followed, learning the station's corridors with him. She had been a ruler who commanded legions, but now she felt vulnerable. Yet vulnerability was teaching her something, trust. And trust, she realized, could be powerful. They stopped near a control room. Elias sat at a console, tapping keys, bringing up navigation charts. "We need a plan for the next jump," he said. "We can't run blindly. They'll anticipate us." Serafina leaned over his shoulder, studying the stars and routes he highlighted. "You rely on logic, not fear," she observed. "It is strange. My people would have panicked by now. They would have made demands or surrendered or sent envoys begging for mercy." Elias looked at her with a small smile. "We do what must be done. Fear doesn't help. Action does." For the first time, Serafina felt a strange sense of alliance, not with an empire or fleet, but with one human soldier who understood that survival depended on trust and skill, not power or fear. Later, as they rested, Serafina finally spoke about her past. "I trusted too many," she said quietly. "Generals, advisors, even ambassadors, all abandoned me when I needed them most. I thought I understood loyalty. I was wrong." Elias listened without interrupting. His presence was steady, grounding. "Sometimes people fail," he said, "but that doesn't mean loyalty is gone. It just means you haven't found the right person yet." The Queen did not respond immediately. His words were simple, but they struck a chord. She had relied on titles, commands, and fear to enforce loyalty. This human soldier offered something entirely different, a quiet, unwavering dedication that did not demand obedience. Suddenly, a sharp alarm sounded from the ship's sensor array. Elias's eyes narrowed. "Hunters," he said. "They found us." Outside the station, a small fleet of alien warships appeared, their weapons charging. They had tracked the Queen across light years, and now they closed in with precision. "Do we fight?" Serafina asked, gripping the console. Elias shook his head. Not yet. We'll use strategy. They expect us to flee or surrender. We will do neither. He led her through maintenance tunnels to a secondary exit barely wide enough for 2 people. We create a diversion. They'll follow the wrong path and we slip away. Serafina's heart pounded, but she followed. For the first time, she felt herself part of a team, not as a queen commanding minions, but as a partner relying on one human soldier's skill and judgment. The plan worked. Elias activated explosives in the abandoned corridors, creating smoke and debris. Alien hunters charged into the trap, their communications disrupted. The Queen and Elias moved swiftly through narrow tunnels, emerging outside into the night. The transport ship waited. Elias powered the engines and lifted off as the hunters scrambled below. Missiles streaked past, but skillful maneuvering allowed them to escape without damage. As the stars stretched past their viewports, Serafina finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. I underestimated humans, she admitted. Your loyalty, your courage. It is remarkable. I see now why you risked everything for me. Elias glanced at her, expression calm but alert. I don't do it for recognition. I do it because it's right. Survival, protection, that is enough, she nodded slowly. Perhaps I have been too proud. Perhaps I have relied too much on titles and fear and too little on trust. He smiled faintly. Trust is earned, not demanded. And you are learning fast. For the first time in centuries, the Queen felt a fragile hope. They were still hunted, still vulnerable, but she no longer felt abandoned. She had Elias, one human soldier who would fight beside her, who refused to leave her side even when the galaxy had forgotten her name. Hours later, as they traveled toward a remote system rumored to be uncharted, Serafina spoke again. Elias, I do not know if I can survive without you, and yet somehow I believe we can endure this. Together. He did not answer immediately. He kept his eyes on the void ahead, scanning for threats. But his hand rested lightly on hers, a small gesture of solidarity. We will endure, he said finally. Because we have to, and because some promises are worth keeping no matter the cost. The Queen nodded, a small but meaningful smile forming on her lips. In the quiet of space, amidst endless stars and silent threats, a fragile alliance had formed. Not by politics, not by power, not by command, but by trust, courage, and an unspoken understanding that sometimes one human soldier could make all the difference. And as the stars stretched before them, Serafina realized something profound. Loyalty, once lost, could still be found. The chase would continue, but for the first time, the Queen no longer feared it alone. The stars stretched endlessly around them, yet peace felt like a distant dream. Queen Serafina and Captain Elias Ward had evaded countless hunters, survived ambushes, and built a fragile trust between them. But the galaxy was full of cunning, and not everyone who offered help could be trusted. They had arrived in a neutral system, a place rumored to harbor a small, hidden colony of traitors and exiles. Elias guided their ship through asteroid fields, landing quietly on a secluded platform beneath the shadow of a massive, abandoned orbital station. This should be safe for now, he said, scanning the area. We can resupply and gather information before moving on. Serafina stepped out of the ship, her armored boots clanging softly on the metal floor. The station was large but mostly empty, its corridors coated in dust. Broken consoles blinked faintly, remnants of systems long dead. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Despite the calm exterior, a sense of unease prickled at her. Be careful, Elias warned. Even in places like this, danger can hide behind walls. They moved through the station together, searching for supplies. Food, energy cells, and fuel were all needed to continue their escape. Yet every corridor seemed to echo with ghostly silence, and every shadow felt like it might conceal a threat. After several tense minutes, they encountered a figure, a tall alien cloaked in dark fabric, who stepped from the shadows with hands raised in peace. Queen Serafina, the alien said, voice smooth and polite. I am Talira. I offer you sanctuary. You are welcome in our enclave. We are neutral, and we can keep you safe from your enemies. Serafina hesitated, studying Talira carefully. The Queen had been betrayed too many times to accept words at face value. Why should I trust you? She asked, her voice cold. Talira bowed slightly. Because my people value life and balance. We gain nothing from your death and much from your survival. Let us help you. Elias narrowed his eyes, scanning Talira with suspicion. She could be lying, he muttered under his breath. We can't let our guard down. Serafina nodded slowly. She had survived empires collapsing, armies turning traitor, and councils that abandoned her, yet there was something in Talira's words that tempted hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find allies beyond the humans who protected her. After some debate, Serafina agreed to accompany Talira to the Enclave. Elias followed, keeping his hand. The planet Duskfall was a desolate place. Its sky was dark, tinged with red clouds that never cleared. Jagged cliffs rose from the rocky surface, and winds howled across deep canyons. There was no vegetation, no cities, no signs of life, only harsh stone and the echoes of long-forgotten battles. Yet it was here that Elias Ward and Queen Serafina prepared for their stand. After weeks of running, hiding, and evading hunters across the stars, the enemies had tracked them to this barren world. There was no chance of escape this time. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered. Elias crouched behind a pile of rocks at the ridge's edge, surveying the approaching enemy fleet. The hunters had deployed dozens of armored ships and thousands of ground troops. Their weapons glowed faintly in the dim light of the planet. They are coming, Elias said, voice calm but firm. And we cannot run. Serafina stood beside him, her armor scratched and dented from previous battles. For the first time, she did not feel fear alone. Elias's presence gave her strength. What do we do? She asked, determination in her voice. We cannot hope to defeat them with numbers alone. No, Elias agreed. But we can make them pay for every step they take. We fight smart, not just hard. And if we do this right, we can survive and make them regret coming here. Together, they began preparing the ridge. The narrow paths, cliffs, and jagged outcrops became weapons in their hands. Elias placed explosives along the most likely enemy roads, rigged traps, and set up cover from rocks and debris. Serafina, once a queen who commanded fleets, now worked side by side with a human soldier, moving quickly, her agility and instincts making her a deadly force in the rocky terrain. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly. The winds of Duskfall whipped against their faces, carrying dust and small stones. Despite the harsh conditions, Elias remained calm, instructing her in the best ways to use the terrain to their advantage. High ground, narrow paths, and traps, he said. We forced them to fight our way, not theirs. You ready? Serafina nodded. I am ready. For the first time in weeks I feel alive, not because of power, but because of purpose. As night fell, the first wave of enemy troops arrived. Their ships hovered above, casting red light across the ridge. Troops poured down, their weapons blazing. Elias and Serafina were ready. They moved as a single unit, Elias firing with precision, taking down the enemy's advanced soldiers, while Serafina used her speed and agility to strike from unexpected angles, sending attackers tumbling down the cliffs. The battle was chaotic. Sparks flew, explosions shook the ridge, and the roar of combat echoed across the barren landscape. Yet through it all, Elias and Serafina never faltered. Every step, every action was deliberate. The queen was no longer a passive target. She had become a warrior, fighting beside the human who had protected her for so long. Hours turned into an endless night of combat. The enemy was relentless, sending wave after wave, confident that their numbers would overwhelm the two defenders. Yet Elias's traps slowed them, the explosives forcing them to retreat repeatedly, and Serafina's precise strikes decimated their ranks. During a brief lull, Serafina caught her breath and looked at Elias. I never imagined survival could feel like this, terrifying, exhausting, and empowering all at once. Elias gave a small, tired smile. That's what fighting for someone else does. You give them life and they give you purpose. That's why I haven't left your side. The queen's chest swelled with respect and something more, a growing bond forged in the fire of shared struggle. You are not like any human I have known, she said softly. Your loyalty, your courage. It is remarkable. Elias shook his head. I am not remarkable. I just don't abandon those I protect. That's all. Their conversation was interrupted by a new wave of attackers. Larger ships hovered closer, unloading troops armed with heavier weapons. The ground shook with each landing, and the ridge trembled under the weight of their assault. We need to hold them until dawn, Elias said, moving toward the explosives he had set. After that, reinforcements might reach us, or at least the light will give us an advantage. Serafina joined him, laying down covering fire as he detonated charges to slow the enemy's advance. Rocks and debris flew through the air, taking out clusters of attackers. The Queen's focus was razor-sharp, every movement precise. Together they became an unstoppable team, a human and an alien queen united by trust, courage, and necessity. Hours dragged on, the night filled with fire, smoke, and the cries of the wounded. Yet for every attacker that fell, more came. It seemed impossible, overwhelming. Serafina felt exhaustion pressing on her, but Elias's calm determination kept her steady. Finally, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the tide of attackers began to falter. Reinforcements from a distant human fleet, alerted by Elias's earlier communications, appeared in orbit above the planet. Their ships fired warning blasts, forcing the enemy to hesitate. Serafina watched the human fleet descend, awe mixing with relief. "They came," she whispered. "You were right, survival is never about fighting alone." Elias gave a small, tired grin. "I told you some promises are stronger than empires. They are coming because they know you cannot be left behind." With the arrival of reinforcements, the enemy began to retreat. The once overwhelming waves of soldiers fell back, their morale broken. The ridge was littered with debris, scorch marks, and the evidence of battle. But Elias and Serafina stood victorious, exhausted. Battered but alive, the Queen turned to Elias, seeing him in a way she had never seen any human before. "I owe you everything," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You did not abandon me when the galaxy did. You stood beside me, fought with me, and saved my life." Elias shook his head. "You didn't need saving. You just needed someone who would not walk away. That's all I did." For a long moment they stood side by side, looking over the ridge, the rising sun painting the barren landscape with golden light. It was not victory for an empire or for a fleet. It was victory for loyalty, courage, and the bond between two individuals who refused to abandon each other. The Queen realized something important. Titles, power, and armies could fall. Empires could betray and crumble. But loyalty, honor, and trust, those were stronger than any weapon. And the human soldier who had protected her embodied all of them. As the human fleet began to secure the area and evacuate survivors, Serafina placed her hand on Elias's shoulder. "I will never forget this," she said softly. "You have shown me what true loyalty means, and I will carry this lesson for the rest of my life." Elias looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "You don't have to carry it alone. That's what humans do. We stand by each other." The Queen allowed herself a small smile. For centuries she had known betrayal, fear, and loss. But now she had found something greater: trust, courage, and the strength of a human who refused to abandon her. As the sun rose over Duskfall Ridge, the battlefield quieted, leaving only the echoes of loyalty and courage. In a galaxy where everyone had abandoned her, Queen Serafina had survived, not because of armies or empires, but because one human soldier had chosen to stand beside her, and in that choice, she found hope, strength, and a bond that could never be broken. The war was not over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt certain of one thing: as long as Elias was by her side, she could face anything the galaxy sent her way. The aftermath of Duskfall Ridge was quiet but not peaceful. The battlefield lay littered with debris, scorched rocks, and the echoes of a night-long struggle. The enemy had retreated, their forces broken and scattered across the stars. Queen Serafina stood at the edge of the ridge, looking at the horizon where the first rays of sunlight stretched across the desolate planet. Beside her, Captain Elias Ward rested his hands on the railing of the transport ship, surveying the remaining enemy ships fleeing into the distance. The human fleet had arrived just in time, tipping the scales and forcing a retreat. Yet even with victory, the Queen's mind was heavy with thought. She turned to Elias. "We survived," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "And yet so much has changed. My empire, my advisors, everything I once relied upon, it is gone." Elias looked at her, expression steady and calm. "Then it's time to rebuild, not in the image of the past, but with what we have now. You have survived because you didn't stand alone. That is the true strength." The Queen's eyes met his, and for the first time in centuries she felt gratitude not mixed with suspicion. She had been abandoned repeatedly by those she thought she could trust. But Elias had never wavered. Through every ambush, every betrayal, and every near-death moment he had stood beside her. "We cannot stay here long," he continued. The enemy will regroup. We need to move to a safer system, one where we can plan our next steps. Serafina nodded. She trusted him completely, not just his skill but his judgment. Lead the way, she said. The journey to safety was long but quieter than anything they had experienced. For the first time, Serafina allowed herself to rest both physically and mentally. She thought of the humans' loyalty, their courage, and their unshakable dedication to promises. She had witnessed it firsthand, not as a concept but as action. Elias had proven that loyalty was stronger than empires and courage more lasting than fear. During the trip, they passed through a small system, an uncharted cluster of moons orbiting a gas giant. Elliot on one of the Mu,